Welcome and to our next episode of Parshat Yitro. And we'll start off with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
I don't think you're recording. Oh, you are. I get it. I see it.
All right, here we go. Vayhi mimochorat. And on the next day, Vayeshev Moshe lishpot et ha'am. Moses sat to judge the people. Vayamod ha'am al Moshe. And the people stood before Moses. Min haboker ad ha'er. Until the evening. Okay, so there is an echo. If you want to just turn that off. Somehow there's an echo. There was an echo. I don't know why, but there was. All right. So
And there's a reference to this in the Siddur Sim Shalom and the weekday when they have the teachings
in here.
before Kaddish D'Rabbanan. There's a reference to Moses sitting to judge the people all night.
Right. It'll be quoted by Rashi. Right. We'll find it in the Rashi. At the end of this Rashi, right out here. It's from Shabbat, page 10, right here. So it's a little developed there, but we have this extremely long Rashi, right? Vayhi,
Wow.
Vayhi mimocharat, and on the next day. So he tells Mecharat on the next day, the day after what? Okay.
Party.
I mean, the pshat would be the next day after he'd been greeted by, they'd greeted each other and met each other.
Mhm.
Right. That's and Jethro offered up his offerings, etc. That's at least what the pshat would be. But okay. I mean, how significant is that? So they want to pull out some more significance than that. And here we go. He goes right to it. Motzei Yom HaKippurim Haya. It was the day after Yom Kippur. And we're going to learn here some elements of the Jewish calendar, which if you don't know already, are really, really interesting. Okay, so Kach Shaninu, this is what we learned Besifrei in the halachic midrash called Sifrei. And the Sifrei this is extant. This midrash is extant, and it is a commentary. It's a midrash on both Numbers and Deuteronomy. This is what we learned there. Umahu mimocharat. So this is, I suspect he's quoting here. What do we mean mocharat? The macharat ridato min ha'ar, meaning the day after he came down from the mountain. And you'll understand from what we're going to read why Yom Kippur is when it is and why it is such a significant day. We're going to learn. For al korchacha, and of necessity, Efshar lomar ela mimocharat Yom HaKippurim. That is a compelling argument. It can be none other than the day after Yom HaKippurim. Why? So this is what's going to take time now. Shaharei kodem matan Torah, because prior to the giving of the Torah, Efshar lomar, you cannot say the verses that are going to come up. We're not going to get to them yet. They are coming up in this chapter. Efshar lomar, and this is the quotation: "V'hodati et chukei Hashem." I let them know, I inform them regarding the statutes or the ordinances of God. And that's here, it's later on, it's not too far down, right? He's asking Moshe, right, etc. Let me find it. Here we go. V'hodati et chukei ha'Elohim. I let them know the chokim of God, the et Torotav, and his teachings, his Torah. That's what Rashi is referring to. Umeshinitna Torah. So that's the point. In other words, if it was before the giving, the Torah wasn't given until that point. Even though it isn't it doesn't come up until the next chapter in our Parsha. But this is the whole point as to why this particular parsha is out of order, this particular perek, right? You can't, what does he have to teach? He hasn't gotten it yet. Okay. So, Umi shenitna Torah ad Yom HaKippurim. However, from the day of the giving of the Torah, which is Shavuot, right? The 6th of Sivan, according to most opinions, right? It's either the 6th or 7th or something like that, but it's basically the 6th of Sivan. Ad Yom HaKippurim, until Yom HaKippurim. Lo yashav Moshe lishpot et ha'am. He wouldn't have had the opportunity to sit and judge the people. Shaharei beyud zayin b'Tammuz, because on the 17th day of Tammuz, which I believe is 40 days after Shavuot, right? So Sivan, and then Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, so 40 days. From the 6th of Sivan to the 17th of Tammuz is 40 days. And what happened 40 days after the giving of the Torah? You tell me. Yes, Golda. I can't hear you because you're muted. You're muted.
I was doing Moses comes down from the mountain.
Why did he come down? Why did he come down?
Because they're partying down there with the
That's
wrong
correct.
guys.
They're worshiping the golden calf.
Right.
They're worshiping the golden calf. I mean, precisely 40 days after. So the 17th of Tammuz, the fast of the 17th of Tammuz, it's a fast day. It's a minor fast day.
Mm-hmm.
And it initially commemorates the worshiping. It's trying to do a tikkun for the worshiping of the golden calf. Because that was absolutely the nadir of, or pretty much close to the nadir of Jewish history, was a very, very low point. Okay. So from the 17th of Tammuz, Yarad, he came down, Veshiber et haluchot, and he broke the 10 commandments, the tablets. Ulemachara, and on the very next day, Allah, the hashkama, he got up early in the morning, Vesha'ash monim yom, and he was there for 80 days. And if you calculate from the 18th of Tammuz, 80 days later, guess what you wind up with? Yom HaKippurim. You wind up with Yom Kippur. So what opportunity would he have had to judge the people? He wouldn't have had any opportunity. So it has to be after the giving of the Torah, and we'll figure as soon after the giving of the Torah as possible, which makes sense. And the soonest opportunity would have been the day after Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur marks the moment when God forgives the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf. The Ein Parsha Zok Tuva Keseder. Here we go, just re-emphasizing this point, that this Parsha, this chapter, is not written in chronological order. Shelo ne'emar, okay, it doesn't say Vahimi Mocharat Ad Shana Shniya, because in fact, that day after wasn't until the second year. Af Ledivrei HaOmer Yitro, okay, that even according to those who say Yitro Kodem Matan Torah Ba, okay, because even if you say that he came to visit Moses prior to the giving of the Torah, which is the Pashat Pshat, as they would say, the simplest way to understand the text, right? Shilucho el Artso Ba, okay, Matan Torah. Shilucho el Artso, the point is there's a passage later on in the book of Numbers, right there. I believe it's in Numbers, in the Parsha of Bamidbar, okay? There's this passage where he wants to go back to his land. It refers there to this situation, right? That he did not return to his land. Lo haya ela ad shana sheniya. It had to be in the second year after the Exodus. How do we know this? Sha'arei ne'emar kan, because there it says, is in that passage, Vayishlach Moshe et chotano, it says, Moses sent off his father-in-law. Umatzinu b'masach hadgalim, and there in the book of Numbers, where they're talking about the what it literally means, the journeys of the flags. but the flags, the banners, refer to the arrangement of the Israelite encampment and their journeys, which is what the book of Numbers is about. At least it's a good element of the book of Numbers, their journey in the wilderness. She'amar lo Moshe, because Moses said to him, and he gives you the reference, Numbers 10, Nosim anachnu el hamakom, we are journeying to the place, etc. Al na ta'azov otanu, do not leave us. The heim kodem, sorry, the im kodem, there's no little shmitchi above the aleph, so it's hard to read it. Excuse me, the imzu kodem matan Torah. And if all that was happening before the giving of the Torah, mishe shalchu v'halach, okay, from the time of from when he set off and went. In other words, if you're going to argue that he actually left, that Jethro left prior to the giving of the Torah, okay, well, he's back in the second year, okay, this is what happens. Hechan matzinu shechazar. Where does it say that he came back? Where's there any mention of Jethro returning to Moses, right, to be able to leave in the second year? The im tomar, and should you argue, sham lo ne'emar yitro, if you say, well, in that passage in the book of Numbers, it doesn't actually say Yitro, it's talking about someone else. Ela chovav, it uses the term chovav. It doesn't say Jethro explicitly. So maybe it's not Jethro, it's someone else. Uvono shel Yitro haya, oh, and excuse me, and he was, this person that we're talking about, this chovav, was Jethro's son. Hu chovav, hu Yitro. You can't say that. Chovav and Yitro are one and the same. They're identical. Shaharei kativ, because it states in Judges, in the book of Judges, chapter 4, Mibnei Chovav, of the sons of Chovav, Choten Moshe, the father-in-law of Moses. So this shows you that it had to be after Yom Kippur, that this Mimochorat refers to the day after Yom Kippur. So that's that whole thing. So understanding now that the relationship of Yom Kippur as a day of atonement, as a day of forgiveness, and the power of that day. And this is not the place necessarily to go into just how awful the sin of the golden calf was. And the reason for it, which had to do with a lack of confidence because they thought Moses had abandoned them. And excuse me, but I think it's quite a jump to go from Moses abandoning them to deciding to worship other gods. I don't think there's a real close connection between the one and the other. But the problem is we see it in our own time. Fear is an awful motivator and a powerful one.
Yeah, it's an emotional response, and it's really hard sometimes to not respond when, because there's a mixture of, the fear is, you thought you had someone who was telling you something that you could trust and, being there for you and helping you and protecting you. And now you feel a break in that, and you don't have any of that in your mind. You don't. They did, but they didn't realize it. There was a barrier, an emotional barrier to their understanding that at that point.
Right. He was one day late. He was a day.
A lot of times, for me, separation and being left out or being disconnected is a huge trigger, and you can do things that aren't wrong, that don't make sense in a rational world when you have this really tremendous intense feeling that you can't control and that feels so real.
It's interesting that the very last line of Adon Olam is Adonai li velo ira.
Mm-hmm.
God is with me, I shall not fear.
I love that part.
And the basic principle of demagoguery, and we are seeing its effects. We are seeing its irrational effects It's emotional effects in our world right now because we had a demagogue and they use fear tactics. That's how a demagogue operates. They use fear tactics to get what they want. So nothing's changed. This is why it is so, what we are doing, what you are doing is so valuable, because human nature is human nature.
And while it's true what you said about the last line of Ado Olam, and it's in all kinds of other parts of the text in other ways, but it's not always easy to accept and grasp that when you're feeling so turned around.
Yes, that's true. First of all, let's say it, nobody would expect it to be easy. The issue is to have the wisdom to work at it little by little by little, and to work and chip away at it. And direction has so much more than just boom. Life is not a light switch. You want, there was that wonderful statement. It's in some ways a cliche, right? This is the first day of the rest of my life. And no matter when you do it, and there are these wonderful stories about Rabbi Akiva, who was an ignorant shepherd, okay? Very humble beginnings. And at the age of 40, decides he's going off to study Torah. At the age of 40. And there's this wonderful story, if you don't know it already, it's one of the most, I love the story. For me, it's a powerful story about when he decides he's going to go to study Torah. And he meets his fellow shepherds, and they're sitting, allow me the narrative, right? They're sitting having lunch. And they say, where are you off to? And he says, I'm off to study Torah. And they say to him, you don't even know how to read an aleph and a bet, and you're off to study Torah. What do you think you're doing? And he says to them, look at this little stream. Do you see how the stream is running over this little cliff? It's not a cliff, but you understand this, and it's hitting a rock underneath. And you can see how the water has made an impression in the rock. He says, if water is capable of making an impression in a rock, do you think the Torah can't make an impression in my mind?
I love that. And that's the same, that's why I'm here. I knew very little, and just being here, it's giving me so much.
It's never too late. It's never too late. And whatever you get, you get. All right? I mean, honestly, there are people who, no modesty involved here, who can run rings around me when it comes to Torah. No question about it. But you just keep working away. I gave you the example of musicians, right? You do it because it's the right thing to do, and because it's part of your DNA, and it's because the process is what matters. It's the old Greyhound bus commercial. Forgive me for all these awful quotes that I'm giving you, right? About it's how you get there, day at a time. There's this, again, another midrash, which talks about this person who says, I'll never learn Torah. I'll never. It's so vast. It's beyond the sea. It's above the heavens. It's so vast that they know this. I'll never do it. And this person says, so that they compare it to a forest, or a thick, dense forest. And he says, what does the wise person do? He takes his sickle and he cuts it a tree at a time, a thicket at a time, little by little by little. You break it up into the smallest little pieces. And that's it. And then you look back and you say, wow, and then you also look ahead and say, wow, there's so much to it, right? The more you know how little you know. But one should not be discouraged. So let's keep going here. Vayeshev Moshe v'gomer vayamod ha'am. Moses was sitting, etc., and the people were standing. Yoshev kemelech. He is sitting like a king. A king is sitting. V'chulam omdim, and they all are standing. V'huksha hadavar leYitro, And Jethro thought, this is not a good situation, right? This was, Jethro found this objectionable. Shahaya mizalzel bichvodam shel Yisrael. Because in a way, this was showing a lack of respect for the Jewish people, for Israel. V'hochicho al kach, and he corrected him regarding this. That is, Jethro corrected Moses regarding this. Shene'emar, as it states, Madua ata yoshev levadcha. Why, or levadecha? Why are you sitting by yourself? V'chulam nitzavim. This is Jethro's words, and they are all standing. You know, here is Jethro, a priest, an idolatrous priest of Midian. And here, the giving of the Ten Commandments is named, the Parsha of the giving of the Ten Commandments is named after him. And I think this is such a powerful lesson in being open to wisdom, no matter what its source is. Because it would be so human and unfortunately so typical to say, who does Jethro think he is to be speaking to Moses like this? And it turns out, of course, he is his father-in-law, which is also such an interesting relationship in terms of looking at Judaism from a universalistic point of view and not a particularistic point of view. And it's true, there are many, many halachot. There's a very strong vector in terms of trying to be true to Judaism, right? And respecting Judaism and recognizing it's our family. But at the same time, not to put down wisdom regardless of its source.
Also, like you said, that this portion is named after Jethro, and in the holiday that we celebrate the giving of the Torah, we read about another proselyte, another convert to Judaism, Ruth.
Yes.
And I think that the way I look at it is because of honoring people who, like, for us, we're born into it.
Right.
You know, and we can accept it because, you know, that's what we do, or we can reject it or whatever. But if you're not born into it, it's really kind of a big deal to give up
Yes.
your kind of way of life, and not for people who do it for marriage, but for people who really want to, you know, people like Cindy, to give up what they knew and to embrace something that's not easy to embrace, and to, you know, to do, for some of these people like Cindy and Jethro and Ruth, to do it, you know, wholeheartedly. And
I know.
And that's something to say, you know, that maybe choosing to do something as opposed to just being born into it is a very just like, you know, the angels, they can't help being good, but we can choose to be good, and that's in a sense more honorable.
There's an element of nobility about it because we were issued the invitation. No, the way I do my interfaith stuff, okay, part of my attitude is the reason why I'm Jewish isn't necessarily because Judaism's the best religion. It's because that was the invitation I was given. Because there's such, from the little I know of other religions, there is such wisdom and greatness in them that I hesitate to say that mine's the best. I don't have to say that to be loyal, hopefully, and to be a loyal son of Israel. And hopefully.
And you could have said no thanks to the invitation. I mean, as
that's right. And they weren't invited.
You could have said no thanks, I'm going another way, but you didn't.
Of course.
We can do that any day of the week.
Right.
We choose this daily.
Absolutely. That's Golda, you may be familiar with the Midrash that says a person should look as every day as standing at Mount Sinai.
Ooh, I like that.
For the reason you just gave. By the way, I think another reason, Lauren, for this is that we should see ourselves as, this is sort of riffing on what Golda is saying, is that we should understand that that when we choose, because obviously as Jews, we can either choose to be loyal to the Torah, we can choose to study the Torah, or we can ignore it. And in that sense, we're all converts. We all are. And I think that's actually stated in.
I mean, I agree. When people divide Jews and Jews of choice, I say, well, I am a Jew of choice.
That's right. You're good. That's right.
I think that's why Yitro got the honor of having this parsha named for him too, because
I
he's
think
like,
so.
he models that.
Right. Exactly. But this advice that Jethro is giving him, as I said before, as to why it precedes the giving of the Torah, what Jethro is going to tell Moses is if Moses had not taken his advice, the Torah never would have been able to come down to earth. It wouldn't have been applicable. Jethro is about to tell him how the Torah can be applied. Anyway, let's go on. Min haboker. This is the statement, Lauren, that you were referencing at the very beginning of this lesson. Min haboker ad ha'erev, from morning until evening. If shar lomar kain, okay, can you really say that he was doing it without a break from morning until evening? Ella, but what is it really coming to tell you? Kol dayan, any judge, shedan din emet la'amito, who renders a judgment in the, to the finest detail of truth, because that's really what justice is about. It is about truth. And if you look at the procedures of a court, what essentially is the process with witnesses and cross-examination and all that? It's to try and discover the truth. Because any judgment that isn't based on truth is a false judgment. It's a corrupt judgment. So, emet la'amito, the truthful truth, afilu sha'achat, even for one moment, ma'aleh alav hakatuv, scripture attributes to him, ki'ilu osek b'Torah kol hayom. It's as if he had studied, he gets the reward of studying Torah all day. Uke'ilu ne'eseh shotef lakadosh baruch hu. And not only that, but as if he is a partner with the Holy One, blessed be he, b'ma'aseh bereshit, in creation, capital C. Shene'emar bo, because regarding creation, it says, vahi erev, vahi voker, etc. It was morning and it was evening, day X. And that is so profound, because what it's saying is, it says, right, that it is the truth is the foundation of the universe. And life, human society, it crumbles when it is not based on truth. And we are watching it happen. We are experiencing it in our current society. That's how awful this is, and why they say it the way they say it. Because justice, truth, foundations of the world, foundations of life. I'm going to stop the recording at this point.
By the way, the next verse, there's no Rashi, but it's the same. It was covered by the Rashi in the previous.
Yeah. Anyway, so
Kind of all intertwined in that spot.
yeah, this is
gonna-
a goose. Yes, I'm no longer recording.
Yes,
No,
you
you're
are.
not.
Oh, sorry, I am. I just stopped the share.